Hey guys, and welcome back to our channel. My name is Johnny, and today we're going to be talking about investing in the stock market. Now, this is actually part of a series that we're doing specifically on how to invest in stocks and to make money in the stock market. And it's focused on a method of stock picking called value investing, which basically means finding great companies for good prices and buying and holding them long term and reaping the benefits of those companies. So today, instead of talking about numbers or metrics or whatever else, today I wanted to talk about something that is equally as important and interesting, I think, and that is my 5 favorite investors. These are basically the 5 guys that I've tried to read everything I can on. I haven't quite finished that reading list yet, but I'm getting there, and have basically taught me everything that I know and taught me everything that I talk about here. And they're kind of the ones that have inspired me to do this. So let's go ahead and start with basically the founder of value investing, Benjamin Graham. Ben Graham was a very prolific businessman throughout the early to mid 1900s, and he owned an investment fund, and he taught at various schools, and he was a very famous, very well-known, and prolific businessman and investor. And he was really one of the first investors in the world to take a look at the stock market and to actually make sense of it, and to make it to basically be able to explain it in a way that made it seem like it wasn't just a casino. Because previous to him, almost everybody thought, oh, it's just gambling, it's just a casino, it's like a slot machine. And he actually found a way to look at it and explain it so that it made sense, and that was by going back to the basics and basically realizing that all of these stocks, all the tickers, they're just businesses and they're companies, and they work like businesses and companies do. So he really founded this whole movement, and throughout his life, he continued trying to refine his methods. And basically what his specific method was, and how this specific method came to be, was that he was a very conservative investor, because he actually lost his entire fortune in the Depression. And so he was a very conservative investor, and his primary method was to find companies that were trading below their liquidation value, because in his mind, if he could find a company that was trading below his liquidation value, then it didn't really matter what happened. It was a safe investment. And he termed the term a net, and we've already explained that before. It just means the assets minus the liabilities equals liquidation value higher than market cap. So that was really his whole method. But again, he was the first one to really teach about stocks being businesses and companies, and not just squiggles and ticker symbols. So, of course, as we all know, his greatest student was the prodigy Warren Buffett. I'm not going to say too much about him, just that he's another one of my favorite investors, and that he's taught basically anyone who's ever learned anything about investing. He's taught all of us a great deal. And his specific investment style started out very similarly to Graham's. Graham was his teacher directly, and he actually ended up working for Benjamin Graham for a period of years, and then he broke off to do his own investment fund, and then eventually went on to Berkshire Hathaway. And he started out with a very, very similar method to Benjamin Graham as far as trying to find these nets, as we call them. But over time, he started focusing more on the qualities of business and trying to find franchises and basically businesses that over the course of many decades will basically compound themselves. And if you think, for instance, about different companies that he's invested in, like Coke and Apple and businesses like that, that's really his focus and has been for the series of many years. And again, so he is more focused on the quality aspect of business, and especially on finding franchises which will last a long time. Now, I don't think there's anybody in the world that is a bigger Warren Buffett fan than Phil Town. And I love Phil Town. He was one of the first investors that I read a book from, and basically he tries as hard as he can to just duplicate what Warren Buffett does and how he acts. And the only difference really between Warren Buffett and Phil Town's investing style is that Phil Town is very much concerned with the specific values a company represents, and he actually sees it as somewhat of a moral issue that he has to go and invest in companies that he personally loves and personally wants to see their values promoted, and companies that he personally uses. So for instance, he loves guns and motorcycles, so he invests in Harley Davidson and Ruger and things like that. And that's his whole spiel, is that you shouldn't invest in something unless you believe in it very strongly, which makes a lot of sense. And that leads me to my final two, my two favorites. First, we have Peter Lynch. And Peter Lynch, actually, of all the investors that I've named, and maybe of all the investors in the world that we know of, he has the highest returns ever recorded. And he managed the Fidelity Magellan Fund for, I think, 13 years there, back in the 80s into early 90s. And I've already talked a lot about him, and I'll just recap real quick. But he managed a multi-billion-dollar fund and did 30% average annually compounded years for 13 years straight. And he was really interesting because they actually referred to him as the chameleon because of his ability to be able to invest in completely different types of companies and get amazing results. So for instance, he also did the Benjamin Graham net companies. He would invest in that. He would also invest in franchises. He would invest in basically startups that had just gone public, tiny companies that he managed to get multi-bagger returns on. And that was actually a term that he came up with, was a bagger. So for instance, if you return doubles, that's a 2-bagger. If it triples, it's a 3-bagger, etc. And he got multiple 10-baggers, maybe even 100-baggers. I'm not sure, but he did some incredible stuff, and he basically every type of investment that you could think of, he found a way to do it. Special situations and turnarounds, everything. So it leads us to our last and probably my personal favorite is Manish Pabrai. Manish Pabrai actually was a businessman long before he was an investor, and he had a IT and software company, and he started investing on the side because he was making pretty good money from it. And he basically said, well, I'm new to this stuff, so I'm just going to clone everybody that's come before me. So he just read a lot, and he got really into it, and he started tracking 13F filings and things like that, and he basically got the methods of some of these other investors down really well, and he basically clones what they do and clones their methods, and it's worked amazingly well for him. He's gotten somewhere between 20 and 30% annually compounding rates for decades now, and really his largest specific thing that he's contributed that's new is that he is a huge proponent of copying what other great investors are doing. He says, why would I work extra hard to try to find new businesses when other people have already found them? And that's not to say that he doesn't, buy his own picks of stocks as well, but he's just a huge proponent of copying and cloning people that have already done the work and are already successful, and it's worked really well for him, and I can't say that I disagree. It actually makes a lot of sense, and that's something that I've tried to do a lot. I see these other investors, and they're great. I wouldn't really change anything about the way that they do things. I wouldn't really change anything about their methods, so I think to myself, I'll just do what they're doing, and it's actually been working out very well for me so far as well. So there you go. There are my 5 favorite investors. My honorable mention is John Bogle, and I didn't include him in my top 5 list because he is not a value investor per se. He actually doesn't really, he's not really a proponent of stock picking at all, and he actually created the index funds that we have today that just follow the market that I've talked about. So great guy. He's really helped a lot of things in the mutual fund industry and has brought a lot of integrity to it. but I didn't include him because he's not a proponent of stock picking, and I personally am. So there you go. That's the video. I forgot to name off some of the books by these different investors. If you want to go ahead and read some different books of these people, Benjamin Graham, his 2 books were Security Analysis and The Intelligent Investor, both amazing. Warren Buffett has not written any books, but you can read multiple books and biographies about him, and you can read his annual letters to shareholders. Some of the books written about him that are really good that I've read personally are The Warren Buffett Way and Snowball. Those are both very good. Phil Town has written a few different bestsellers, some by himself, some with his daughter. He's written Rule Number 1, Payback Time, and Invested. Peter Lynch has written One Up on Wall Street, Learn to Earn, Beating the Street, and Manoj Pabrai has written The Dondo Investor, and I believe his other book is called Mosaics, Lessons on Investing. Not positive, you might have to look into that one to get the name right. But there you go. There's some reading material for you. There are some investors to try to learn from, and I hope that was helpful to you. I know that these guys have really helped me, and like I said, pretty much everything that I ever talked about comes straight from one of them. So that's all that I have for today. Before I go, I'm just going to say, go ahead and go on over to the Pura Vida website. The link is in the description below, and just go ahead and check out the product, and if you end up buying some, remember to put in the code DelaneyLang20 at the checkout, and that'll give you 20% off of everything site-wide. Alright, well that's all I have for today. I'll see you next time. See you later. Bye.